Okay, hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this series. Again, it is the Mastering Life series, and I am Brittany McDonald, and I will be going over the critical thinking aspects of life and how we can use that to move forward and really empower ourselves as young people, especially in a Caribbean context. Give me one moment. I am going to just double check another message that I received, possibly from a participant, and we'll begin shortly. Okay, great. So now that that's taken care of, let's go over some housekeeping rules and do a recap. So we would have discussed our ground rules in our introductory session. And so it's important to remain respectful and maintain that with each other throughout the session. Stay open minded, think about what's being presented, and then take some time to internalize it, to use the information that you're receiving and apply it to your specific circumstances. It's not meant by any means to be applicable in every single scenario, but it should be able to give you some kind of guidance and guidelines in how to proceed. And then lastly, share your opinions. This is a safe space. I want to echo that every time we have this session and throughout this series, that we are being respectful, that we're listening to the opinions of others, the experiences of others, and it should be an environment where you feel comfortable to share your opinions, your beliefs, and your experiences, as I would have mentioned, so that we can give you some feedback and some input, and again, get that guidance. Additionally, we will have new topics posted monthly. So we would have done our introductory session going over all of the different topics that we're going to be covering throughout this Mastering Life series. And then you will see the individual topics posted on Facebook, on Instagram, different platforms that we have on all of our social media. And this will be done on a monthly basis. That way, it gives us time for the next thing, which is here, our one-on-one sessions that can be scheduled either through Calendly or, as you would have seen in the email, you can also correspond with me via email to do a Zoom scheduling. It's very flexible, but I do want to be as accessible to you as possible because you're taking the time out to, register for this course, to sign up and learn more about how you can improve yourself and improve professionally. And so I want to be able to give you myself as a resource in order to better your experience and to, if you have a question, you'll be able to have, an answer or at least some guidance into how you should address that particular circumstance. Then we discussed how we can stay connected. So if you haven't joined our WhatsApp community for discussions and opportunities, please do so. It is, again, in that email link. So if you're registered, you will be getting all of these emails and you will be able to join our community and stay in touch. On Yentreb, I think about this as a tribe and the fact that we are helping each other. And I too expect to learn from you and your experiences. And this WhatsApp community is a great way for us to do that, to stay in touch. And then also has opportunities for young people, whether that's in Antigua and Barbuda or throughout the Caribbean, are presented to me in various formats. As I mentioned, I would have worked across a few industries. And so I do, from time to time, get some really amazing opportunities where you'll be able to learn from other experts in their field and in different areas. So whether that's in infrastructure or environment or in cooking or technology, in art, it really is a broad spectrum. So those opportunities as well will be posted, and I will also aim to put them on the email link as well, depending on how soon of depending on how soon I get them, because sometimes they are sometimes sent to me really short notice. So maybe only a week left where you can like apply. So taking that into my notes, I'll do as much through the WhatsApp community so that it gets like a quick response, but also via email, because I know persons don't always check the community and may want to receive things via email. And then, most importantly, remember to have fun and build connections. Your mind does not know that learning is hard, that changing habits is hard. You have to, again, be open minded and think positively towards the information that you're digesting, and that's it's presenting you other options in how you can change your behavior depending on your circumstances, again, for the better. And so that's also something to keep in mind, that, have fun. We're here to learn. We're here to share knowledge and to, create that community, that tribe, and to build connections, because again, the issues that you may be experiencing, someone else may also be experiencing it as well, and or have gone through it already. And so it's great to network and to build that community and to do it in this space. If you are watching on our YouTube channel or listening through the podcast link that YouTube has set up for this session, then thank you again for joining us, for listening in. We really appreciate your support, and you can still be a part of the community. You can subscribe to the channel, and you can post a comment or share this video with anyone that you think needs it. You can save it. There are many ways that you can show support. And again, this session is a free and interactive session for young people, specifically in the Caribbean, but we know that we can reach a global audience in this day and age in 2023. So we are on YouTube as well. And thank you so much for your kind support. So as we're going in today, the topic for the session is critical thinking. And yes, it is a part of our Mastering Life series. When we think about mastering life, it's about making sure that we have the tools in our toolkit so that we can deal with situations as they arise. It may not be a perfect cookie cutter, step by step process, but if we have the tools, we can do trial and error. We can test things out and see how the results play out, and then we can adapt and adjust. And that's what we're going to be talking about throughout this session. And I chose critical thinking as the first session because our minds have often been trained to think linearly, one way, one direction. This is how it has to be, very narrow and tunnel vision, and at no fault of our own, right? Because there are many things at play, whether that is our environment, whether that is our family, our friends, the school we went to, the country we live in, the city we grew up in, and then also the global environment as well. All of these things are at play, and often we don't recognize how much our thinking is a product of those elements that come together and create us. And that is why you'll always hear me say, it sounds like I have like a repetition, but don't worry, I'm saying it on purpose, that it depends on your individual circumstances, right? And that's where I don't want to paint this broad brush and say, oh, this is how it has to be. No, these are the tools. This is an opportunity to gain some insight into how a process can move forward. And then you'll be able to apply it now that you have that experience under your belt. So, a little bit of background about me for those of you who are joining in for the very first time. Again, welcome to our community and to this podcast. My name is Brittany McDonald. I am many things, but in this particular circumstances, it is through me being a project management consultant, a Caribbean young person myself, as well as a global citizen. That is how I've always seen my particular experience. And I have experience over 10 years in project management, in scheduling, scoping, costing, various aspects, and in different industries. So I would have seen how different elements come to play and then also intersect. So whether that is gender affairs or the environment or technology, um, food systems, all of it has a part in how our daily lives are constructed and go about, and how we go about our daily lives. And from that, I said again that I wanted to contribute to the young people of this world, and particularly those in the Caribbean and in Antigua and Barbuda, because I would have loved someone who would, take the time out to answer some of the questions that I had. And it's not in every situation that your parents may have the answers on that particular topic, especially if you're going into a field that they have not, had any experience in. Same thing with any relatives. And then also, I found that these were the tools that our education system is frankly lacking. And no one taught me critical thinking in school, unless you want to consider like the math problems that we used to do with like Amy has 2 apples and Sarah has 5. They ate 4 apples. How many do they have left? Those kind of problems. Yes, they do instill critical thinking. But, it's not in a way that's always readily applicable to the scenarios that we as young people face in our daily lives, right? Math is definitely top tier. You're going to need it. So, just a small plug for math right here in the session. Please stay focused on math. Change your attitude towards it. If you don't like it, you will need it. Please, definitely. Right. And so again, just thinking about the critical thinking skills, the creative skills, the emotional intelligence, all of these are aspects that you are going to need in the workplace. You're going to need for your relationships, even if they're on a personal level. You're going to need them if you want to start a business. So there's no area of your life that critical thinking skills, don't play a part. You're going to need it. If you are deciding whether to buy one dress over the other, you're going to need it. If you're going to decide to purchase a car over taking the bus, you're going to need your critical thinking skills for those situations. And I wanted to empower you to be able to use this lesson as at least a foundation to develop those particular skills. All right, so that's a little bit of background about me. And so we're going to be talking again about how the critical thinking can help ourselves, but also looking at it as well from a community perspective, right? Each individual creates their community and is a part of shaping it, and how it becomes its own unique ecosystem. And then again, it focuses on our personal and professional development. So critical thinking is a skill that allows us to evaluate information. It allows us to transform data, raw facts, raw information, which is data, into something that is logical and systematic. Information can come in various forms. So it could be an idea, it could be arguments that you're having, so a debate. It can be just random numbers based on population, for example. So if you know that the population of Antigua and Barbuda is 100,000 and that the population of Dominica is, you know, 400,000. It's not 400,000, but I'm just calling out numbers here. 400,000, that's data. That's information, right? And you'll be able to take that information that you have and then translate it. Critical thinking is a translative process. It's almost its own language, and that's part of what makes it so unique and also somewhat difficult if you don't go through the process of learning how to accomplish it, right? Accomplish success with it. And so ideas and arguments translate and can be translated into logical and systematic ways. And when I say logical, I mean that it has structure, that you're going through the process of analyzing, evaluating, synthesizing it, making it concise, pulling apart the details so that it's something that's useful and beneficial to you. And from that point, you can use it throughout your life in different ways, such as in making decisions, right? When we're thinking, we're often using it to make decisions about our next steps, about our actions. And so, this is why critical thinking, again, is so powerful and impactful. And it's because our thinking translates to action. And so it helps us to make informed decisions, solve problems. So that's where the math part came in, with Amy and Sarah and their apples, and to communicate effectively, because we can then use that data, that raw data, transform it from just information into decisions and into solutions that we can use in our life. And when we think about how important it is to have a system of sorts and not just be impulsive in the way that we make decisions and to do our actions, then we can really begin to live a fuller life and be able to be comfortable and not have regrets about not taking the time to assess, our actions and our thoughts before we do anything, right? And so, again, another definition here of critical thinking is that it's a mental process. And when we think about the fact that it's a mental process, see how that kind of shifted in your mind? That it's not just a thinking process, it's a mental process. And so, what do we need to do for a mental process? For a mental process, we need to be in a good mood normally. We need to be in a good space. We need, not to be hungry or thirsty or tired or cranky or anything like that. And we need to be able to, really have all of the pieces kind of in front of us. And so there's other aspects to critical thinking that we don't always discuss, but because I'm very passionate as well about mental health awareness, I wanted to bring that to the forefront here as well. So it is a mental process. So that means that you can't make decisions when you're hungry. You can't make decisions, well, and it's not make any decision, but are the best decisions made when you're hungry? Like, think about it. Like, have you made really good decisions all the time when you're hungry, especially like if it's food choices, right? So, have you always chosen the healthy thing if you're hungry? Not really, right? You may decide, I'll just have this like cookie or something like that, just to satiate your hunger. And so, because it's a mental process, our hormones are in play, and that's for men and women. And then it's also based on those environmental factors. So, what I would suggest is that throughout any thinking process, especially when it's a major decision, that you ensure that you're considering your surroundings, considering what's happening internally with you. Are you thirsty? Are you hungry? Are you emotionally in a good space where you're able to think rationally about the data that is set forth before you so that you can make really good decisions based on that? And that really plays a role. I'm going to pause here because I do see that we have a new participant joining on. So I just wanted to say welcome to our session. We have just started going through our definition of critical thinking, but just to go over again some of the ground rules, that we're going to remain respectful, have a good time, keep an open mind, and we're also going to share our opinions and our thoughts, right? So does anyone want to share any opinions on critical thinking so far, or what you thought it was? Feel free to unmic, or you can raise your hand and I'll be able to unmute you. All right. Okay, so we can move forward, no worries. All right, feel free. This is an interactive session. So if you have any opinions, feel free to interject and let me know that you'd want to share some thoughts. All right, so going through these 5 steps here, we'll be talking about the benefits of critical thinking, the characteristics of a good critical thinker, and developing our critical thinking skills. So, things that we can do in our daily life, and the application of our critical thinking skills and how we can use it, how we can adapt and adjust to different circumstances throughout our lives, and so that it can really be impactful and a resource for us. So again, this is a recap here, that it is a mental process involving analysis, evaluation, and synthesizing information. It is a systematic method of thinking to understand complex issues and to make sound judgments on those issues. It's also to be grounded in being rational and fair. Those are very important character traits and things that you would be well known for, especially on a personal and a professional level. And then also, it's used to solve problems that we have and to communicate effectively. And problems are around us. I know that it can be very overwhelming at times because problems sometimes are simultaneously happening. There's multiple areas of our lives that could be exploding at once, but it's important that we're able to have these skills in place, and that tells our mind to remain calm because we know that we got ourselves, right? Especially in the absence of, being able to share the specific circumstances with other people. All right, so then now we're going to go through. Oh, excuse me, one moment. Okay, so moving on to our next slide, which is the importance of critical thinking. So, critical thinking is important because it helps us to make better decisions, right? And when we think about the decisions that come towards us, there are many types. So it could be financial. I would have given an example of purchasing a car, purchasing a home, deciding whether to buy on one website, for our clothing versus buying it in person where we can try it on. So there's different pros and cons in every situation. And so it helps us to be less swayed by our feelings, and then also biases that are innate. And that would be another podcast session, another series session where we would go through the various like natural biases that we have, and then also false information that could be out there. It helps us to do research and things like that. That helps us to make sure that the data that we have and the information that we have is accurate, and it is the information that we can use to move forward. Sometimes we get information and it's not always from a reliable source, so it's good to double check the source as well as to look for other sources from reputable articles, newspapers, research papers, and research institutions as well. Again, that just depends on the type of decisions that need to be made, and the circumstances. And then it's also, again, important to solving problems and breaking it down into components that are easier to digest. And for example, if I wanted to buy a new computer, so I love my computer, but let's say something happened to it and I needed to buy a new one. There are at least like 20 computer brands. And so while I have enjoyed this computer, there may be another computer out there that is beneficial to me and would greatly improve my productivity, reduce, the time that I spend on the computer because it's just easier to use and they have different applications. And so breaking that up into steps is going to make it a lot easier for me to analyze and to come up with solutions in order to get the best computer possible. So going into an example, with the same computer in mind, breaking it up into different areas such as the cost of the computer, the functionality of the computer, the accessibility of the computer, and then also how easy is it for this computer to get repaired or replaced based on the manufacturer's warranty or the store's policy. And so instead of thinking only about, I need a new computer, I'm now thinking in segments and then creating results on those individual segments. So I would look at the cost, and then I'd look at the functionality, and then looking at the accessibility and the other area. And then I would also rank the importance to me, because for one person, budget is everything. But for another, it could be the accessibility because maybe they know they have a toddler, for example, and something might spill on the computer, or the glass may break, and they want it easily repaired. So they don't mind spending $50 more for a computer or working with a manufacturer that would provide that service because they know that it based on their specific circumstances, that is what they need. And so that's an example of breaking down the components and how we can logically and in a particular method analyze the process of buying a computer. And so that's a broad example, but it's one that should be very relatable because most persons may have access to a computer or electronic device, or attempting to make a purchase of some sort. And so finally here, critical thinking is important for communication. And we always say communication is key, communication is key, communication is key. And I know that's something we have been beaten over the head with several times. And it's correct, but it's not the complete part. Communication is key, but it's also how we comprehend that information and how we share that information and that communication. Those are also just as impactful, because you can be communicating all you want, sharing information, but if you're not doing it in a manner that is relatable, using words that people recognize. I could come on this and talk about critical thinking in very highfalutin jargon and calling all of these big words, and you'd be like, okay, I'm gonna turn this off because she's just talking in different words that I don't understand, don't comprehend. It's just jargon. And while every industry, yes, has that information for this purpose, I want you to be able to understand it at a base and a ground level, no matter where you've come from, education wise or work wise, and be able to understand how you can use this information tangibly. So, communication is about how we express our ideas and catering it to the audience that we have so that they are able to understand. And even though I've placed persuade here, persuade, yes, not necessarily to get people to side with us, which I find is a lot of the communication style we have right now. It's we want to feel either validated or for persons to say, yes, we're right. But that's not the point of communication. The point of communication is to be able to deliver your opinions, your thoughts, your decisions, to set boundaries, and then to have those understood by the other party, whether they like it or not, right? Because a person doesn't have to agree with you, but they can respect your decision. And that's again where boundaries come in. And we'll talk about that a bit more in our emotional intelligence discussion. But communication is so important because of that particular aspect, right? And it also helps us because we can solve complex problems when we're communicating efficiently. And once we're able to do that, we can avoid making any hasty decisions based on incomplete information or misunderstood information because we weren't communicating properly, or the other person was communicating and we didn't process it properly, right? And so let's continue on into the benefits of critical thinking. And I've listed a few here. If you see any that you think should be included that you have for experience, feel free to type in the chat as well. That's another way that we can engage. And so the benefits of critical thinking is, again, avoiding making hasty decisions with incomplete or incorrect information, understanding and appreciating different perspectives. When we're thinking about a topic and working towards a decision, we have to pull from other sources other than what we believe is the correct way to move forward. And so, for example, thinking about the computer again, we may say that an HP computer is the best computer to purchase. That is what we believe. We've had HP for 10 plus years. They've never done us wrong. And so our buying decision is based on history. And a lot of people go on history for some of their major purchases because they trust the brand. And that's great. But what's also important is to see what is new. What are the competitors of HP putting out so that you would be able to make an informed decision on what the industry standard is, because HP could technically have you 5 years behind, but then another brand, could have you 10 years ahead. But because of just using incomplete information and just focusing only on history, then you're not giving yourself the opportunity to expand your horizons and to decide that, yes, HP is still the leader in this particular computer type and computer use, whether I'm a graphic designer or I need it just for general productivity, for document preparation. And so you're giving yourself a more rounded experience when you think outside of the box. And then you're able to identify and evaluate arguments and evidence, right? And in this aspect, you can appreciate the time it takes to review and to do the research. And that's how I look at identification. It's really research, because when someone puts forth an argument to you, let's say that Miss Susie says, she has the best dumplings in all the land. I'm using like local but different examples here. So if you're from Antigua, you can guess who maybe Miss Susie is, but I changed the product to dumplings. So dumplings in all of the land. And, in this instance, you have to do some research. So now you have to find at least, 3 or 4, 5 dumpling makers, and you have to sample these dumplings. And, that might be a fun part because it's food. But you have to think about it in terms of texture, taste, and when I say taste, the flavors, the combination of them, the shelf life, if it's packaged well, does it include the ingredients? And then you compare those 5 side by side on those 5 or 6 technical components. And then you also look at, of course, the customer service experience. Maybe Miss Susie, gives you a token of some sort with every purchase, or you get loyalty rewards. So maybe after so many dumplings, you get a free dumpling, that sort of thing. So you're thinking about the qualitative and the quantitative. So quantitative is more of the numbers, the things that you can assign the numbers to. That's that kind of data. And then you're thinking about the subjective data, which is more of the emotional side of things, how it makes you feel, the conversations and the surveys that you have with Miss Susie's customers. Maybe they say that every time they go, they've never had a bad dumpling. And that's something that you would have to transform into a qualitative data, because it's really talking about the quality of the experience, and that's part of what that word means there. It's the quality, but it's also somewhat subjective instead of some of the harder numbers that can be presented, such as revenue, in terms of sales, and then also number of customers and number of stores, for example, that Miss Susie may have. And so a research can take time. And again, this is probably one of the more daunting points of critical thinking. And it makes you assess, okay, do I really want to, go this deep? And that's a part of the assessment. So you have to have a cutoff point, because the rabbit hole will go as far as you go. And you have to decide, okay, based on 4 criteria, or based on 2, or based on 1. And you give gravity to it based on the level of urgency that you ascribe to this particular decision. So for example, you would take more than 6 months for, to decide on, purchasing a house, versus taking 6 months to decide what you're going to eat for dinner. So those are two radical examples, but that gives you some kind of weight in terms of each decision has its own kind of bearing in terms of time that you want to apply to it. So you wouldn't want to spend too much on a problem, too much time, I should say, on a problem that's not as complex. Right? For complex problems, solving them through critical thinking is important, and being able to identify what is complex and what is not is equally a part of the process. And then again, making these informed decisions and identifying any of the logical fallacies that we can discuss further. If you want a specific discussion on some of these logical fallacies, let me know in the chat or comment, because that's an area that we wouldn't have seen on our registration form. And I would love to go over some of those fallacies if that is an area that you're interested in as well. All right, so we're moving forward. We kind of have an idea of how critical thinking is going to help us, what it is, and how we can generally apply it to our lives. So let's try and think about now the mental part of the characteristics of who we need to be to do critical thinking. We talked a bit about the environment, making sure we're in a good mood, that we've eaten, and how those things can play a part. But let's talk about some characteristics, right? And the first one that I placed here is curiosity. And I purposely placed this in I am formats because, again, I love affirmations, daily affirmations, and I want to impart that to you. I think that's something that everyone should be doing. And this is a part of how we can grow and internalize, and we're telling our brains, we're training our bodies to understand these aspects of critical thinking and become these characteristics in the scenarios that will come in life. So the first one is, and feel free to say it where you are, don't be shy if you can, I am curious and ask questions to gain a deeper understanding of a topic. I'll repeat that. I am curious and ask questions to gain a deeper understanding of a topic. And so curiosity is a key component that, as a critical thinker, will take you forward. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't. If you don't ask the question and it ends up gnawing at your mind, or you find out more information later after the decision is done, you may feel the tendency to, question yourself, but, you are working with the information that you're given, but it's always good to ask questions. An example of this is if you're in a store, and I love doing this when I shop, so I'm giving you some of my secrets there. If I go into a store and I'm shopping and I see a dress, I see a top, I'm purchasing a few things, and I'm making this purchase, I'm spending a bit of money. I wonder if they have a discount. I'm curious about it naturally, not in the sense that I won't pay the full price because these are items that I may need for whatever purpose, but it's always good to ask for, if there's any sales going on or discounts, because when we approach life, we realize that information isn't always shared freely with us. And in a retail setting, there may be a sale sign that you could have missed, and the retail associate will be able to tell you, hey, yeah, there is a discount going on. There's a sale in this area, but not on this. And so you'll be that curiosity, peak it in everyday life, everyday activities. It doesn't have to be on a major complex problem, but owning that curiosity will help you when it's larger issues so that you can build that confidence in being curious. So I know you're probably thinking, why did she use a retail example, like asking for a discount? That's what deeper understanding of, the store's practices do you need? But in applying it to our daily life in different ways, we can then use it and it becomes a habit and it forms that habit of being curious. The next one is being open minded. So the affirmation for being open minded is I am open to new ideas and willing to consider different perspectives. Repeating it again, I am open to new ideas and willing to consider different perspectives. When we are in an argument, and when I say argument, it doesn't mean that we're yelling at each other or shouting or any of that. We're having a discussion and we disagree and or we have different perspectives and we're sharing each other's perspective. That's like the genesis of an argument. We could have a discussion and it's not necessarily information sharing to that degree, but with an argument you're sharing pieces of information that may be unknown to the other party, and then they would be able to state at the end of the argument whether they agree or whether they disagree still, or whether they've been neutralized in their understanding of the particular topic and want to do some more research, for example. But being open-minded is a huge part of this process, because you can just shut down once you hear a different perspective other than your own. And you may have experienced that with someone. It could have been your parents, it could have been your work colleagues, your friends. Once you give them an idea outside of themselves and what they've been exposed to, they maybe clam up and kind of, I don't want to talk about it anymore, or get angry. And that isn't the response that a critical thinker should have, right? We are open to new ideas. We want to find out more, because as we know more information, our perspective can shift or it can remain the same, or it can also be infused with this new information so that we remain confident. It can build upon it. And so different perspectives come for different reasons. So it could be exposure, maybe on a political level or a religious level or a cultural level. There's different ways that perspectives may shift from what we are used to. And so it's important to stay open-minded so that we can have that sort of clarity throughout the conversation, and then in terms of making our decision. The next characteristic is skepticism. Now, this looks like a bad word, but it's not a bad word. It is a part of questioning. And so when you're skeptic, you understand that something has been presented to you. So, for example, I don't know if any of you have any children, but if you've ever experienced like maybe a toddler or even a preteen, saying, I did my homework, do you just take it for face value that this person who has no other responsibility but playing and enjoying life and to do this homework so that they can learn has chosen to do this homework over playing? And so a healthy level of skepticism is good, right? It can go overboard where you're just questioning everything, but you shouldn't let skepticism degrade trust, especially from persons who are established in your life. But your mind and I'll be very frank, your gut will tell you when you should question something a little deeper. You'll feel unsettled in some way, right? And the affirmation for skepticism is I question assumptions and seek evidence to support claims. So the first part is I question assumptions. Really, I should have put my assumptions there. And then I seek evidence to support my claims or the claims of others. And so I'll repeat the affirmation I question assumptions and seek evidence to support claims. And in doing this, again, we sometimes make assumptions, and these are logical fallacies at times or based on biases. So, going back to the computer example, we could have said, I assume that HP is the best, the best, the best, the best. We're not going to go with anyone else. That is an assumption that they've kept up with all of their you know, the market demand and instilled all of the new technology into their devices. That they have done all of the upgrades. We can assume that. But the skepticism now is questioning that assumption and saying, did they adhere to the market demand and their customer requests of improving their technology year over year so that when I purchase a computer, it has the latest on it, the latest technology. And so that question starts, but here's where the action comes in. I seek the evidence to support my claims. I have to seek this out. Again, this is a research part. I search on Google. I look at different scholarly resources. I go on YouTube. There's a lot of information on YouTube, which you still have to kind of be careful because you have this influencer community where some persons maybe get paid to do these reviews. And so you have to, again, be skeptic with if this is a valid review based on it. You go into the store and you go to the HP store, you go to, well, in Antigua, we have like ACT Online and a few other, computer places. But, if you're listening in the States, you have Best Buy, Radio Shack. Oh, we have a Radio Shack here too. I think we did. I believe we do. And, you'll be able to assess the quality of these products and say, I see that this is within the scope of the product that I'm looking to purchase. And so finding that evidence then helps you to feel confident in making your decision, especially, if there are third parties involved or if it's a financial decision. All right, we have about 2 more characteristics that I'd want to go into here, and it's clarity. I strive for clarity and precision in my thinking and communication. I strive for clarity and precision in my thinking and communication. And so the object of communication is to have clarity. And it's also to be as clear as possible in how we are thinking and how we are communicating as much as possible. And so when we think about clarity, I want us to envision it from a physical standpoint. So our physical being has to be clear, logical, in a good place, attitude wise. We're not in a hangry mood when we're, making our decisions, and we're clear. We're at a peaceful state generally. That's not to say that some decisions, and especially with critical thinking, that we're not able or not required, I should say, to make decisions under pressure, but when we feel comfortable making the decisions from a calm place, a grounded place, even if it's within an emergency, we can be calm during that particular storm, right? And then the last one is the logical thinking. You have logical thinking within you. And so the affirmation is, I use logical reasoning to evaluate arguments and evidence. I use the logical reasoning to evaluate arguments and evidence. This means that I am going to apply a strategy towards the way that I'm evaluating these arguments, whether that's on best practices or based on my specific circumstances. So there are maybe multiple factors outside of what is usually catered for in a standard practice that you may need to envelope. And that could be based on your personal dynamics or if you're in a professional situation. Usually, this can be governed by an operations manual or your legislative framework. So, for example, we are in the Caribbean, so we would have local laws that would guide our logical thinking. So, for example, you would know that if you go into, let's say, a supermarket and you didn't have enough money to purchase an item that you wanted. So let's say the item is a candy bar and the candy bar that you want is $20. However, you only have $15. You have to logically think through that process that and these are things that you do without even knowing. So I've done it with like meat. I'll look at the meat and see that it's $15.95, and then I find one that's like $15.54, and I'm like, that 40 cents difference is great. I'm taking it. So this is like real world examples of how you're even using your critical thinking skills, and you may not even think of it as such. And so the logical thinking is, I need to then find a candy bar that is within my range of $15 because that's my budget for the supermarket. And so if I go to the cash register and I give them $15, but the candy bar costs $20, they're not going to give it to me. They're going to ask, where's the other $5, right? And so when we're thinking about frameworks, we know that if we were to take that candy bar, like let's say we just ran out of the supermarket, grabbed the candy bar, left our $15, there's a $5 difference. The supermarket's calling the police, ring, ring, ring. We have someone, we caught them on camera. They have $5 for us. They took the candy bar. That's not logical because we know that there's a consequence based on our legal framework that protects that institution from theft or, persons taking partially paid for items, right? And so when we're thinking logically, we have to use the information that is around us that generally governs us either on a country level or an organization level, and then also the unwritten rules that we have, right? So in our culture, we have a lot of norms that, people adhere to. And so that is a part of our logical thinking as well. So, for example, a norm we may have, and it's pretty big in Antigua and Barbuda and in the Caribbean, we always say hello, good morning, right? That's a sign of, respect, that you're understanding that you've entered someone else's space, that they were present in before you, and then just a general sign of like courtesy, right? And so that's an example of a cultural norm, a societal norm that we have. But in other cities and other countries, people just walk past each other and that's their norm. Actually, it could be disrespectful to stop someone who's a stranger, or to say that to someone who you don't know and in the same environment. And you'll find that, you'll see that cultural difference the more you may be able to travel and experience other cultures. But what might be a cultural norm for you is not a cultural norm for someone else. So again, the perspectives come in there, and it would be able to help us with our overall decision making process, right? So using those brief examples, to kind of guide us, those are some of the characteristics really of a critical thinker that I think are some of the most important. One that I wouldn't have placed on here that I just want to say as a general rule with anything in life is to remain patient with yourself, patient with those around you, because decisions can be easy, but they can also be very difficult. And you want to give persons the time and then also the grace as well if their perspective is not, um, or has been proven, I should say, incorrect in whatever way. And so there's emotions involved because there's beliefs that are, integrated as well in our critical thinking and why we came up with those decisions. And maybe at the time we thought we were thinking logically. And so being patient, and recognizing that we are human, that we are, capable of making mistakes, that is also an important characteristic that critical thinkers have as well. All right, I'm going to pause here. Do you have any questions for me? Feel free to place them in the chat as well as we go through. We'll be moving on into some of the examples of critical thinking in our daily life. I would have been sharing some as we go through the session, but I wanted to just pause here if there are any questions, comments, anything you'd like to share. Okay, so I don't see anything in our chat, so let's continue. That means that so far you're grasping all of this information and you're thinking about ways that we can now apply it in our daily lives. And so here's some examples that I wanted to walk through with you. So options before making a purchase. Anything financial, you're going to need critical thinking skills for it, hands down. Some decisions are easier than others. This is true, but you are definitely going to need your critical thinking skills. So we would have already gone through the HP example, already gone through the retail example for how we can remain curious. So I won't go through that particular series again. We talked about home purchasing, car purchasing, gift purchasing is also another example of like critical thinking skills. But in a professional environment too, there are standards for procurement, generally of goods and items. But how we evaluate that process is thinking about, quality, the assurances that it's functional, fit for purpose, and we'll be able to go through those particular steps. When we solve a problem at work or in our personal lives, that is us using critical thinking skills. So if you've ever had a disagreement, maybe someone took your the idea that's coming to mind is someone took your lunch from the refrigerator and you found out who it was, and you're having a discussion with them on why they should not have done that. It may seem like a no-brainer. Why are you taking my lunch that doesn't belong to you? You didn't cook it, you didn't put it there. But for other people who are impulsive, they don't think in that particular way. And so you have to kind of break it down to them that this is off limits, set those boundaries, and demonstrate this is why, you should not, be going into the commonplace of the work fridge and taking our items, right? In a more, concrete example as well, thinking about, solving a problem at work with your critical thinking skills could be the decision of, which, vendor to go to, or how to tackle a problem. So sometimes the critical thinking is, how do I address this problem? And so, for example, if you were going through, your resources and saying, all right, I need to prepare a document. What are the ways that I could deliver this document so that my audience understands it clearly, it's engaging, they can use it as a resource? It could be that instead of creating a Word document, you decide that a more engaging and interactive way of presenting the material is through a word puzzle or through a template of some sort, a checklist. Or it could be a PowerPoint, or it could be an Excel worksheet instead. Or you may realize that in order to solve this problem, you need to create a database. So, for example, if you have a shoe store, you work in a shoe store, you may want to keep track of all of your clients and their purchases to understand what shoe they purchase the most and what's their reason behind purchasing it. And it could be something as simple as the laces go all the way up to the ankle, and that's why they purchase that particular shoe. And so you keep track of it. And the impact that it can have is that you no longer purchase shoes that don't have the laces that go all the way up to the ankle. And so you're saving money, you're saving time, you are ensuring that your inventory has smooth turnover. And it's as simple as keeping track of that data and solving a problem, which is wondering why other inventory is not moving, right? So in our work life, there are different ways that we can apply our critical thinking skills. And again, I would focus on being curious, curiosity, and taking initiative in that area and building your confidence there is vital to that overall process. In our personal lives, critical thinking again plays a role where we would be able to evaluate our relationships. And when I say that, I don't only mean like romantic relationships. I think about the platonic relationships and, the family relationships that you may have, the associations as well, because in our personal lives we may be affiliated with different organizations or groups. And so, there's ways that we can combat the use of the overuse, I should say, of our time, of our energy and resources. And so in our personal lives, critical thinking is very important. When we do this, we can look at the pros and the cons of the decisions, and we analyze the arguments and can have a debate, discussion if necessary. Talking to other people helps. And another tip that I would say is very helpful is to unlock that logical side of our brain, writing it down, not just typing, but physically writing it down on pen and paper can help stimulate our logical thinking so that we are seeing, what the facts are in front of us. And that is powerful for our body, our brain to internalize, because it creates some sort of tangible aspect to these thoughts and ideas that can be somewhat far reaching at times, depending on the particular topic. And then we talked a bit about like resources, making sure that we read various sources and seek information that is from credible and accurate sources, right? If you have a question on a particular topic or even an article. There is a reason why those that are published have contact information for the person who wrote the article, the organization that published the article on their behalf, because you can contact them. It's not just um, for show and tell. It's for identification, and that identification comes with the responsibility that if there is follow-up that is needed, or if there is further information, or if there's a correction that needs to be made, that there is a point person. So that's a good indicator that the source is credible, because they are committing to the accuracy of their information. All right. And then moving into developing our critical thinking skills here. And in doing so, we want to practice. And growing up, I always heard practice made perfect. And that is in somewhat a case true. I would say that, being able to do something multiple times, repetitively, in a good form and good fashion, because if you go to the gym, the trainer will tell you if you lift the weights, you can lift them, but you might not be lifting them in proper form. And so you are defeating the purpose of the workout, of the exercise, and not getting the full potential and the full gain that is in play. Right? And so by making sure that we're developing the skills based on our characteristics that we know we need to hone, right? We are developing that in a way and in a manner that will be able to, improve our critical thinking, because you already have it. I'm not disputing that you have it. We're not starting from scratch, but we're doing things to improve how we think critically. And so asking questions, remember we talked a bit about the assumptions and being a little skeptical, being curious so that we build our confidence. Asking questions is a great way to improve your skills. Asking questions that are open-ended are important as well, because they encourage deeper thinking and reflection from the person that's being asked the question. It's easy to give a yes or no answer. But when you're seeking information to help solve a problem or to make a decision, then you need as much information as possible. So, for example, if I were to ask you, what is the best tool to give a PowerPoint presentation and why? That is a completely different question from PowerPoint is the best. PowerPoint is the best presentation tool to use. Do you agree? That's a yes or no, right? That's a yes or no question. It makes a statement first, actually, and then it asks, do you agree? Instead of even asking, it framed differently, as in the first option, it leaves it more open-ended, right? And so the last question is more controlled. I've already said somewhat of my bias that PowerPoint is the greater presentation tool to use. Do you agree with me? That doesn't help if we're trying to find out what is the best tool. We want to leave it open-ended as much as possible. And so framing our questions with this in mind is important, right? So asking, what tools do you know are really good at improving engagement when doing a PowerPoint presentation? And then they may say Prezi, they may say Another tool that's out there on the market that you may not know, and then you'd be able to get from them as well. Why? Because you've asked that open-ended question so that they're able to give as much detail as possible. And then you can, of course, have follow-up questions as well. Then you can evaluate the arguments. When people are giving their answers and their reflections, they may say things like, because that's the way it's always been done. I'm sure you have heard that before. That's how we do it. This is why. PowerPoint from Microsoft is the best because this is what we've used. It never fails us. This is it. That's the answer. And so the strength of that answer is not really there because they are using again that historical perspective and not even giving any input on the details, the traits of the software, that it's easy to format, that it already has templates, and that it's great for beginners who may not, be as maybe tech savvy as other persons are on those other tools that are there. It's easy to share. It can be translated whether you have a Windows or a Linux or an Apple computer. They could have given details, but just to say this is what we've always used, so that's why we're doing it, that's not a strong argument. We can easily go through, other tools that are there on the market that can be used, and as a matter of fact, may not even have a cost to it, right? So we look for evidence to support or refute the argument that's presented to us. I want to pause here and also say that in this refuting process, right, when you're refuting an argument, it can often come off as somewhat antagonistic to the person who is receiving, this information, because again, it's different perspectives, different beliefs. And so if they're not open-minded, then it can come off as an attack at times. So what I would recommend is ensuring that in your delivery, you have that clarity of speech, of tone, of word choice, that you think about how you are communicating to the person, to the group, because you want to be mindful of the reception as well that you may have based on the information that you're providing. And that's important because we're not always willing as humans to accept that there's more information out there, or that we should be doing something another way, or that there's a better way to do it. And so it's important for you to have that already in the back of your mind, how I'm going to lead with grace, to be patient, to take time to explain, why there's difference of opinion, why this particular point that you have used as a fact is not a fact, but maybe a bias. And so I always encourage anyone, when you're communicating, to do so from a place of care and from a place of consideration. Again, we went over patience being a characteristic, but it really comes in here because often arguments can become heated. Maybe there's like door slamming if it's like on a personal level, or people, storming out of a boardroom. And things can definitely escalate, especially if the tensions are high within a work environment or within your personal environment, and you want to remain as level-headed as possible and calm when you are making these decisions. And so that's a skill to develop there, and that's why we need to practice evaluation, asking questions, and being curious every day, and in, simpler items, so that when larger aspects come about, we are ready and prepared. And again, that's why you're tuning in to this session, so that you get that toolkit for critical thinking. All right, so when we're going through arguments, here's what we do. We identify biases. So be aware of your own biases because you have them. You have your own biases, whether that is based again on your culture, where you come from. For example, this is controversial, don't bite my head off, but as a Caribbean person, I could say that we have the best beaches. And every Caribbean person would agree with me. I don't think there's a Caribbean person alive that would disagree with me, right? Right? And so that, though, is a bias because I am from the Caribbean. I have seen Caribbean beaches, but have I seen the beaches of everywhere else? I've seen some beaches that aren't very beautiful. So that's how I felt the way I felt. But I haven't really done the research to see if there is a beach that could top one of our beaches, right? And so that is a bias that I have. And so being able to identify that while there may be some truth, and that's how we sometimes get tricked up in our critical thinking, there's some truth, right? The Caribbean does have beautiful beaches. I post a lot of beach content on my channel. So there's beautiful beaches, sandy shores, clear turquoise water, but there are other places in the world that do have sandy beaches, clear turquoise water, and I may just have not experienced them, right? So for someone from that part of the world having a discussion with me, they would identify my bias in saying that we have the best beaches in the world when I haven't truly experienced or researched all of the beaches and their beauty. And so we try to evaluate information objectively and without bias, and through our logical thinking process of analyzing, breaking down into components. And so again, for the example with the beaches, we would be, looking at sand quality. We would look at clarity of water. We'd basically use it as if we're testing out diamonds here. So the 4 C's, like cut, clarity, color, all of those. And we would say the clarity of the water. Are there fish swimming at the shoreline? Are they happy? Like, are fish happy? You know, how does the sun reflect on the sand? Do you get that perfect tan? Different criteria that we would set up, and then we'd be able to evaluate each beach based on that particular criteria, and then decide where are the best beaches. And it may not be just one place, right? It could be there's one in the Philippines, there's one in Australia, there's one in, Grenada, there's one in Antigua, there, different places. So we can say that these 5 are the top. And so that's how you would go through that evaluation process after recognizing that you have a bias in that particular area. Others will have biases as well. And so it's important to realize that all the information could be tainted by that bias. And the way that a person's perspective shifts can really be done by identifying this bias and presenting it to them in a professional way and in a way that demonstrates that you care about their knowledge and their education rather than just being correct for being correct's sake, right? It's not about winning. It's about making sure that a good decision is made. The next thing to improve our critical thinking is to practice the analyzing and solving problems. I love crossword puzzles. I didn't get them at first. Like they used to come in the newspaper. I don't know if anyone remembered those in the Daily Observer papers, but I would also see them in other, publications such as magazines, and I would just run away from them. I was like, what are these boxes? And finding the letter that fits where and these weird phrases that mean another word. But that helps so much in building our critical thinking skills. And and if you're better with numbers, Sudoku is great because that is analyzing multiple scenarios. So there's 9 boxes in Sudoku. Yeah, at least, well, you can have different grid sizes. I shouldn't limit it to just 9, but you'd have about 3 by 3, and then you have the numbers that go in, and then depending on the level of difficulty, it may have just one number in each box or 4 numbers in each box to make it easier. And then you can do a comparison. Those are things that you can do that are also fun, but challenging for your brain, because in doing that puzzle or those puzzles, you are training your brain to see where the anomalies are, where the issues could be, where the accuracy is, and where things fit together. And that's what puzzles are, right? They are putting pieces that belong together, but they're jumbled.